How is everybody doing? This is Geeks Between Worlds. I am Oscar Lucio. Quarter 1 of 2020 is jam-packed. Let's talk about if Final Fantasy VII Remake can survive it. I am a huge Final Fantasy fan. This video is going to be going over the critical success of Final Fantasy VII Remake, the sales numbers, and the comparisons that the game will draw at launch. So if those things don't interest you, this video may not be for you, but if that interests you, then stick around. Now, before I get into all the games that Final Fantasy VII will be getting compared to at launch, let's talk about the hurdles that this game is already facing. Right off the bat, Final Fantasy VII Remake has a fight against itself. So many people are going to be comparing this new remake to the original Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation 1. That may be its biggest obstacle, but we also have to think, how long is this game going to be? I hope it's 25 to 30 hours. If it's anything less than that, I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed. And then that's followed up by another question, which is how much money are we going to be spending on parts of the Final Fantasy VII Remake? Will it be cross-generation? We're not too sure. Most of those questions will be answered right at launch. We will know the critical reception, how people feel, and how people compare it to the original Final Fantasy VII. So now we could start talking about the game's Final Fantasy VII Remake will be going up against Quarter 1 2020. The first title that I'm about to talk about is going to set the bar for Final Fantasy VII Remake. I really believe that how well this game does will directly affect the success of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And come on, you know what the game is. It's The Last of Us Part 2. This game launches February 21st, and that's like 11 days before Final Fantasy VII. If The Last of Us Part 2 is a masterpiece and Final Fantasy VII Remake is anything less than that, then it is going to be directly compared, and I think docked a lot of points for not being as good as The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us Part 2 is probably going to be a Game of the Year contender. And it's hard to believe that they're not nailing for The Last of Us Part 2 to be anything short of perfect. People will be fresh off of that Last of Us 2 high. They're going to get into Final Fantasy VII Remake, and Final Fantasy VII Remake has to match those expectations. But that's not the only game. We have a bunch of games in Quarter 1 like Watch Dogs Legion. So this is going to be like the first big game that comes out that's not a PlayStation exclusive like The Last of Us and Final Fantasy VII. So everybody is going to be playing it, tweeting about it, letting you know how it plays, how it feels, and how it compares to the other Watch Dogs. And it seems like this is the most unique Watch Dogs yet. And then, believe it or not, there is another game coming out that March that may be a Game of the Year contender. You don't know. It's extremely hyped. Everybody wants it. And that's Animal Crossing New Horizons. I know you're saying, what, Animal Crossing compared to The Last of Us and Final Fantasy VII? I don't know. People love pulling weeds. People love talking to Isabel. People love Animal Crossing. And it comes out March 20th. This is going to set that Switch community on fire, and if the Switch is still rolling hot, then a lot of people are going to be talking about this game. If for whatever reason creating your little island village and fishing is way better than taking down the Shinra Corporation, then we have bigger problems probably than just the critical success of this game. This game probably failed maybe. I don't know. And I'm not even to the most important game of the year yet in Quarter 1, and that's obviously Cyberpunk 2077. This game is coming out April 16th, and it has to be one of the most hyped and anticipated games of this whole generation. If there's any game that has GOTY written on its forehead, it is Cyberpunk 2077. And like Watch Dogs Legion, this is a multi-platform game. Everybody will be playing this game. Units will be selling like hotcakes. And with this game being at the very beginning of Q2, we're going to be able to look back at all those Q1 games and really get a sense of understanding of how we feel about those games. So hopefully by then, Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to be like, wow, this is still a Game of the Year contender. I can't believe it was on par or better with The Last of Us. Maybe we get a PC or Xbox announcement. And then we're talking about Final Fantasy VII and Cyberpunk 2077 being the GOTY contenders of 2020. And this is awesome because it really makes me remember 2017 when we had the GOTY matchup between Persona 5, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Zelda Breath of the Wild all in Q1. And for 2020, it's looking like The Last of Us, Final Fantasy VII, and Cyberpunk. So to round out the critical success, I think that Final Fantasy VII has to be at least 25 to 30 hours so we all feel like it's a really full and enjoyable Final Fantasy experience. If we are going to be buying different parts of that game, that is key. We can't be left with a short end of the stick. On a technical note, Final Fantasy VII just has to keep doing what it's doing. The Last of Us Part 2 is going to look fantastic, and so is Cyberpunk no matter what. But Final Fantasy VII has that nostalgia factor, and once we see new characters brought to life, it is going to be really nice to see, and that is going to get a lot of bonus points, I believe. Now, at the tail end of this discussion, I want to talk about some sales numbers. For reference, Uncharted 4 has sold 15 million copies. I do believe that includes the copies that were bundled with PlayStation Slims and Pros, but I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty sure that those bundles are included in that sales number. Spider-Man PS4 is sitting at about 13 million copies, and it sold 3.3 million copies within the first 3 days. That made it PS4's fastest selling exclusive ever. As of 2015, Final Fantasy VII has sold 11 million units. Now, a Steam leak in 2018 disclosed that it sold about 1.2 million units on Steam. That equals to about 12 million units, and we still don't know the total sales for Xbox One and Switch in 2019. Now, if you just want to ballpark a guess, let's just say another million units were sold through Xbox One and Switch. That equals to about 13 million copies of Final Fantasy VII sold to this day. The most recent Final Fantasy title, Final Fantasy 15, has sold about 8.4 million units so far. As I said before, I think these sales numbers will not be hindered by the crowded Q1. I think this game has a lot of nostalgia, a lot of hype behind it, and I think that a lot of people are going to be buying this game regardless of what they've purchased around it. As far as milestones go, I don't think it could break Spider-Man's fastest selling exclusive record right now, but I do think that it has a chance of selling about 2.5 to 3 million within the first 3 to 5 days. I think it sells more than Final Fantasy 15 at that 8.4 million units, and I think that it also sells more than that 2015 projected number of 11 million units of the original Final Fantasy 7. I think this game ends up being around 12 to 14 million units sold, and maybe 8 million of those units within the first year. So I do think that this game has a lot of potential, especially to break the all-time Final Fantasy series record. I think it could definitely do that. I think this game is going to be fueled by nostalgia, exclusivity, and it's going to be catapulted by really good critical scores. Now, if none of this happens and The Last of Us is a masterpiece and Final Fantasy VII is like anywhere from like a 6 to an 8 critically rated game, it's going to be rough. And I bet you a lot of those questions are going to lie in: how long is this game? How much money am I going to be paying for the different parts of this game? How empty is it going to feel at the end? Do I feel like I need more Final Fantasy VII to justify this purchase? But in a perfect world, we're getting a 40-hour game. We're going to be getting free DLC and news within 6 months of a part 2, what that means to us and how much we're going to be paying for it. But don't forget, this game is still going up against Avengers, Halo Infinite, and a slew of games that could possibly still release in 2020, like Breath of the Wild 2, Metroid, Bayonetta 3, Ghost of Tsushima. I think that Breath of the Wild 2 could be coming out in 2020, since it knows that it's going to be going up against brand new consoles, and that's going to be another Switch seller. Thanks for joining me today. Let me know what you think about what I talked about today in the comments below. And most importantly, let me know if you think Final Fantasy VII is going to succeed or fail. I appreciate you liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, GBW out.